Resident Evil 2 is the first big game to launch in 2019, and if every other game lives up to the potential shown here, man oh man, 2019 is going to be a damn good year for gaming. What's going on, guys? Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. And if you enjoyed this review by the end, make sure to leave it a like, and if you enjoy the content, make sure to hit that subscribe button. So Resident Evil 2, it's available today for 60 bucks on the Xbox One, the PS4, and the PC. All the footage you'll be seeing is from the Xbox One X version of the game, running at 60 frames, and it feels so good. And yeah, I'm sure you guys can already tell by the tone of my voice, I absolutely loved Resident Evil 2. I have been waiting for this game. It was my second most anticipated game for 2019, if you watched that video. And the final product actually exceeded all my expectations. So yes, Resident Evil 2 is a fantastic game that everybody should pick up, especially if you love the survival horror genre, if you love Resident Evil, particularly the older Resident Evils. But what's new in this version, right? This is a remake of the PlayStation Classic. Well, first and foremost, it's got the modern amenities, the presentations, the cinematic storytelling. But the big change here is the 3D camera. That's right, no more fixed angles when you go through the police department. You actually have full control of the camera around you, and no more tank controls. You actually can walk while aiming. Although you might be inclined to try to play Resident Evil 2 as an action game, think, along the lines of Resident Evil 6, but it's not. This is a survival horror game. You're supposed to go into it with limited supplies, limited ammo, and going up against hordes of the undead. Your goal is to survive and make it out of this nightmare, not to kill every single zombie that you see. But I know there are a lot of you out there who haven't played Resident Evil 2, so I'm going to briefly go over a little bit of the story. You play as either Leon Kennedy or Claire Redfield, who's looking for her brother, Chris Redfield. You pick which character you want to play at in the beginning, and after a short intro/prologue, you'll end up at the Raccoon City Police Department. And if you're like me and played the original 20 years ago, as soon as you open up those doors, a strong feeling of nostalgia will wash over you as you recognize familiar landmarks and hallways and sections that just bring back some really great childhood memories. You'll realize that you played this game before, but it really never looked like this. And then you'll get to certain parts that are completely different, and you'll thank Capcom for remaining true to the original, but not being beholden to the original. This is more of a reimagining than it is a true remake, and I couldn't be happier with how everything turned out. Let's take the graphics, for example. Top-notch, AAA quality graphics. Everything just looks good. The characters' faces are modeled well, and the gore. Oh yes, the gore is among the best in a game I've ever seen. The sound design is absolutely amazing when you can hear the tyrant walking around 2 floors above you as you run for your life, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, the game is fairly linear. I mean, your goal is to escape the police station, but to do so you need certain things. You need some medallions, and some of those items that you need are hidden behind doors that you need keys for, or a valve to open up the way. So the goal is to basically walk around into the areas that are open to you, collect the ammo, the herbs for healing, gunpowder, anything that seems to be of use, to try to find the stuff you need to open up the areas that you need to progress into. However, it's not as easy as it sounds, because in the police department, in the sewers, in the Umbrella Research Lab, well, there are the undead walking around, and they can be aggressive. They can come at you pretty unexpectedly and take a bite out of your neck, and you can only survive a few of those. Now, you've been conditioned to basically destroy and kill any and every zombie that you've come across in most action games the last few years. However, that strategy will not work in Resident Evil 2 because it's a horror game, not an action game. These zombies will come at you even if you put 5 shots in their head. Sometimes they just keep on coming. The point is to avoid them and conserve your ammo and continue on with what you were doing rather than standing one spot and putting enough bullets into the undead's brain to leave it down. And you know what? Quite frankly, I'm not even sure how many bullets actually kill zombies because I've dropped some and come back later and they get up again. So it's best to just stun and move. And that's one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they play Resident Evil 2. They want to play like an action game, and it's not. Now, can we talk a little bit about Mr. X, the Tyrant? My lord, I don't really get scared in video games. Sometimes a jump scare will get me, and there's a couple here in Resident Evil 2, the jump scares that truly got me. I wasn't expecting. I jumped back in my seat, so bravo to Capcom for that. But Mr. X, the Tyrant, this big hulking monster in a black jacket and a black hat, he makes an appearance and he stalks you almost for the rest of the game. And it was so frightening, so nerve-wracking sometimes, that I honestly ran around like a little girl trying to avoid him while still trying to get done the things I needed to do. And yeah, I know you can down him with a few shots of the Magnum to his head, but even on standard difficulty, he's only down for a minute before he starts chasing you again. And that excellent sound design I mentioned at the beginning, when you're running away from him, going down the corridors, running into zombies, you can hear him right behind you, or you can hear him above you going through the doors, constantly tracking you. I haven't really felt that kind of dread in a survival horror game, maybe ever. So kudos for Capcom for making Mr. X one of the most enjoyable, frustrating, and just dreaded moments, characters, whatever you want to call it, in video game history. And then you can even talk about the Lickers, because they're honestly just as horrifying as Mr. X. You know, they weren't that big of a deal in the original, but they upgraded the Lickers in this one. They look disgusting with their brains hanging out, and they are fast. They come at you, hit you a couple times, and you're dead. The Lickers are no joke in this one. Like I said, the enemies, absolutely fantastic in this game. Some of the best in a survival horror game. There's not much wrong about Resident Evil 2. There is a quibble I do have. You know, I guess you could say that the second playthrough isn't as different from the first as I would have liked. Because yes, like I mentioned, you pick a player at the start, Leon or Claire, and once you finish that playthrough, I picked Leon at first. That playthrough took me 7 hours to finish, and then you can start Claire's playthrough, her B section, or second run as they call it. And that one is slightly different. The beginning is different, the middle is different, and the end is different, but most of the stuff in between is exactly the same. So I was a little bit disappointed in that aspect, that things didn't change that much. I mean, you do get a better sense of what's going on. Claire has a section where she's rescuing Sherry from an orphanage, while Leon has a section where you get to play as Ada Wong for a little bit, and then the end bosses are a little bit different, but for the most part they're exactly the same. And Claire's section took me about 5 hours. So for a complete playthrough, you're looking at about 12 hours of time. And that's on standard difficulty. They do have an assisted difficulty, which makes things easier, and then a hardcore difficulty, which, well, it's hardcore. You can only save using save ribbons, and enemies are tougher, and things like that. But this is just Resident Evil 2 brought up for the modern times. It's got a AAA presentation with AAA graphics, sound design, and everything you could ask for. The game runs great, 60 frames per second on the Xbox One X. But the one downside that I'm not sure if it's how would you describe it? A tribute to the original Resident Evil 2, the cheesy dialogue and stuff. That is carried over. The dialogue in Resident Evil 2 is absolutely atrocious. especially when you compare it to the level design, the gameplay, the presentation, the look of the game. Everything is just top notch. But the voice acting and the dialogue is subpar. It's something I expect from a, low budget title, not from something that clearly cost a ton of money. So that's like really the only wrong thing, or the only bad thing I'll say about the game is the dialogue and the voice acting, and maybe the second playthrough not being as unique enough as I thought it should be. But man, if you want a harrowing experience, if you want to be on the edge of your seat, if you, like me, really miss survival horror, they don't make games like this anymore, man, and that's depressing. If you love survival horror, you owe it to yourself to pick up and play this game, whether it's right now at $60 or down the road when it's on sale for $30. I can't wait until they announce the remake for Resident Evil 3, because after hearing about the success of this game, 3 million sold in 1 week, you know it's coming. And Resident Evil 2 has to be the best remake ever. The best reimagining, or whatever you want to call it. The only other game that even kind of compares is last year's Shadow of the Colossus, and that doesn't even reach the same level as this game does. But I know survival horror isn't for everybody. Some people will be frustrated with your knife breaking or the lack of inventory slots to hold all the different ammo and things that you need. They'll be frustrated by the fact that the zombies, you're supposed to just stun them and move on rather than kill them all. So if you want to play this game as an action game, it's probably not for you, but for everybody else, I think you'll love Resident Evil 2. So with all that said, I'm going to give Resident Evil 2 a 9 out of 10. It exceeded all my expectations, and I cannot wait to see what they have in store for the Resident Evil 3 remake. Anyways, guys, that is the review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. Let me know in the comments below if you are planning on playing Resident Evil 2, if you currently are playing, or if you are going to be getting it at some point down the road. Make sure to share this out on Twitter with a friend or on Facebook. I'd appreciate that. If it was your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you always want to be notified immediately when I drop new content, you'll notice that bell icon right next to the subscribe button. Hit that, and you'll always be notified right away when I drop new videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see everybody in the next video. Later, guys.